She woke up with memories that weren't hers, and a face she couldn't explain. But when Clara finds another girl, identical to her, locked in an abandoned underground lab, the truth hits harder than any lie. She was never alone. This isn't just a mystery. It's a battle for identity, memory, and the right to exist. Before we dive into this twisted sci-fi thriller, hit subscribe. You won't believe how deep this story goes. The platform at Brighton Hill Station exhaled a soft, metallic sigh each time a train pulled away. The screech of wheels on tracks dissolved into the distant hum of city life, muffled by the thick spring air and the age-polished bricks of the terminal walls. It was 6:47 p.m., and the crowd had thinned to a gentle trickle of late commuters and half-wandering tourists. Clara Benton stood beside an iron bench with peeling green paint, her fingers resting lightly on the handle of her weekender bag. Her train home had been delayed, again, and the voice on the overhead speaker sounded more apologetic than informative. She didn't mind. Not really. The truth was, she'd been arriving early and leaving late for weeks now, lingering in the forgotten corners of the world as if afraid to return to the neat apartment and quiet walls that waited for her. She adjusted her scarf, an unnecessary layer in the mild weather, and sat down with a sigh, her gaze drifting along the edge of the platform. There, against the wall by an old vending machine, sat a suitcase. It was strange only in its stillness. A vintage piece, hard shell, deep burgundy leather, with brass corners dulled by time. The kind you didn't see in airports anymore, too cumbersome for the overhead bins and too elegant for the conveyor belts. It looked like something out of a black and white film, but there was no one near it. No panicked passenger returning for forgotten luggage, no sleepy tourist wrestling with a coffee and map. The suitcase simply sat there. Clara tilted her head. Abandoned luggage wasn't unheard of, but something about this one whispered to her. Maybe it was the silence around it, the way people passed it without even seeing it, as if it had been placed there deliberately, not just forgotten. She stood, walked slowly toward it. Each step felt both casual and weighted, like something in her body knew before her mind did that she wouldn't be walking away from this moment easily. It had no tag, no airline label, no address sticker, not even a luggage tag with initials. The lock was old and rusted, the kind that could be forced with a bobby pin or flathead screwdriver. Her reflection warped in the brass plating, skin ghosted pale under the station's aging overhead light. "Excuse me?" she asked a station attendant passing by, a young man in an orange safety vest. He glanced toward her, then the suitcase. "That yours?" "No," she said. "It's been here a while. She hesitated. "I was wondering if someone had reported it." The man shrugged. "Could have been here since the last train, or longer. We'll call security if it's still there by closing. If it starts ticking, let me know." He laughed, the kind of joke made out of ritual rather than humor. Clara smiled politely but felt nothing in her chest, just a cold awareness growing quietly. She waited until the man disappeared around the corner, then knelt beside the suitcase. It was heavier than she expected. With a furtive glance around the now mostly empty station, she reached for the clasp. It wasn't locked, just stuck. She pressed harder. Click. The latches popped open with a soft metallic sigh. Clara lifted the lid. Inside, nestled among folded layers of yellowed linen, were photographs. Dozens of them. Black and white, color, some Polaroid, some film-printed. Most were of people, smiling faces in parks, at picnics, standing before brick homes or leaning out of windows. Men, women, children. They looked ordinary, but she felt instantly uneasy. She pulled one free and stared at it. A woman stood on the front porch of a white clapboard house, holding a baby in her arms. The edges of the photo were curled. On the back, in looping handwriting, June 1973, Willow Lane. Clara picked up another. a boy on a bike, a man in a suit with a dog, a birthday party. But none of the faces were familiar, not in the way real memories are. They felt like borrowed recollections, misplaced moments, and all of them shared something intangible, a hollowness in the eyes, like smiles that had been held too long or frozen in place by fear. One envelope sat tucked beneath the lining. Clara peeled it open carefully. Inside were birth certificates. Originals, authentic and old. 3 different names, 3 different places, all from the 1960s and 70s. She checked the parents' names. 2 matched between documents. But the strangest part, what made her breath catch in her throat, was a photograph half buried behind the rest. It was a young woman, perhaps 18 or 19, standing in a field of tall grass. Her hair was tied in a low braid. She looked straight into the lens. Her face. Clara stared. Her hands trembled. The girl in the photo looked exactly like her. Not similar, not look-alike. Identical. The same almond eyes, same curve of the jaw, same small scar above the left eyebrow. A childhood accident Clara had all but forgotten. She turned the photo over. No date, no writing, nothing. Her stomach churned. She sat back against the wall, breath shallow, the distant clatter of a departing train echoing through the terminal like a warning. This wasn't just a suitcase someone had left behind. It had been left for someone to find, and somehow, impossibly, it had found her. The suitcase sat in the center of Clara's living room, its presence impossibly dense, as if it held not just memories but weight, the kind that rearranged everything around it. She hadn't meant to take it. That's what she kept telling herself. She had stared at it for nearly 20 minutes in the terminal, torn between turning it in and walking away, or doing what she did. She had stood there, the photo of the girl, of herself, burning a hole in her hand. And then, without fully deciding, she had picked it up, carried it onto the delayed train, and sat with it like a passenger beside her. No one stopped her. No one asked. Now, hours later, her small apartment in Croydon felt like a stranger's home. She hadn't turned on the lights when she came in, just opened the suitcase and begun cataloging its contents like an archaeologist stumbling into a lost tomb. The room was dim, lit only by a flickering lamp in the corner and the low hum of streetlights filtering through sheer curtains. Photographs spilled across the floor like pieces of someone's life disassembled. There were nearly 100 of them. Some were loose prints, others stored in yellowed envelopes or cheap black albums. Faces stared up at her, smiling, frowning, blurred by motion or shadow. Some had writing on the back. Most did not. But the one constant was her own face, appearing again and again. Sometimes as a child, sometimes as a teenager, once even cradling a baby. Each time she found another image of herself, of someone who looked like her, Clara felt a knot in her chest tighten. It was as if her own history had split and scattered without her permission. "Who are you?" she whispered aloud. It was the 4th time she had asked the question. The girl in the field, the woman holding the child, the laughing teenager on a beach, her arms wrapped around a faceless man whose image had faded almost completely. Whoever she was, this woman had lived lives Clara had never known. And somehow, impossibly, she had done so with Clara's face. The sound of her own voice startled her in the silence. She stood up, pacing, arms wrapped tight across her chest. Clara Benton was 34 years old, an editor, single, born in Leicester. Raised by 2 loving, if distant parents, no siblings, nothing traumatic, nothing strange. She liked jazz, she read true crime. She owned a cactus named Walter and had never done anything more illegal than double parking during Christmas sales. This wasn't the kind of thing that happened to people like her. And yet, here it was. On the table, her laptop blinked awake. She sat down and began typing, fingers moving out of habit and training. Search. June 1973, Willow Lane, Brighton. Family photo. The image had been labeled on the back. It was a start, but the results were sparse. Local real estate listings, a few old news articles about development grants. Nothing matching the porch or the woman. She tried different versions. Names she had seen on the birth certificates. Phrases like Benton Family, 1973. Willow Lane History. Orphaned Sisters, UK. Nothing. It wasn't just that these people weren't online. It was like they had never existed at all. She moved to the birth certificates, spreading them out across the table under the lamp's golden glow. Elizabeth Grace Hargrove, born 1965, Surrey. Eleanor Marion Ford, born 1968, Derby. Clara Jean Benton, born 1991, Leicester, her own name. She froze. It wasn't a copy of her birth certificate. It was an original. A perfect match. But how could it be in this suitcase? And why were these three names grouped together? A detail caught her eye. All three documents shared the same registrar's signature, though the dates and towns were different. James K. Halley. She typed it into the search bar. This time, a result. A long-retired civil officer, quoted in a 2011 article about record-keeping reforms. He had passed away that same year. Clara leaned back in her chair. Someone went to a lot of effort to keep this quiet. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Private caller. She hesitated, then answered. Hello? Silence. Then a voice. Low, measured, unmistakably deliberate. Stop looking. This isn't your past. The line went dead. Clara sat frozen, the phone still pressed to her ear long after the call had ended. Her pulse thudded in her temples, slow and heavy, like distant footsteps approaching down a dark hall. Stop looking. This isn't your past. The words repeated in her mind, not like a warning, but a verdict. She stood up too fast, knocking her chair back with a hollow clatter. Her apartment, once cozy in its quietness, now felt watched. The lamp cast long shadows on the walls. She drew the curtains, heart hammering. Who had called, and how had they known? She hadn't told anyone about the suitcase, hadn't posted, hadn't shared. It had barely been 6 hours. The only person who'd seen her with it was the station attendant, and he hadn't even cared. Clara checked the lock on the door. Still bolted. Her phone screen was blank now. No number, no trace. She clicked into the call log. Private number. 10:47 p.m., 11 seconds. Not enough time for a trace, she figured. Not that she knew how to trace a call. Not that the police would believe her if she tried to explain any of this. She rubbed her arms, trying to shake the cold that had crept into her skin. The suitcase waited silently behind her, its lid still open, photos like loose feathers on the rug. She turned back toward it, more cautious now, more reverent. Among the items she hadn't yet touched was a small black notebook bound with twine. It had been nestled deep in a side pocket, its cover cracked and soft like worn leather. She picked it up, carefully unwinding the string. The handwriting inside was neat. Slanted. Female. October 11th, rain all day. Stayed in. He's getting more anxious. I think he suspects I've been writing things down again. October 14th. Saw the man again outside the shop. 3rd time this week. He never buys anything. Just watches. Clara flipped ahead. October 19th. I dreamed about her again. Same dream. We're on the train platform, and she's holding my hand. She says, this time, don't let go. And I wake up before the train comes. Always before the train. Her fingers trembled slightly. The notebook was a journal. But whose? Some pages were torn, others were smeared with water damage, or tears. It wasn't a full account, more like a series of snapshots from someone's inner life. Some entries read like dreams, others warnings. I buried the file. If they find it, they'll know what I saw, what I did. The photo. I think she's me. Clara closed the notebook. She stood very still. The feeling, the same one she'd had at the train station, returned stronger than ever, that she wasn't uncovering someone else's history. She was walking through the ruins of her own, even if she didn't yet know how or why. She scanned the photographs again. One in particular caught her eye, a group picture, maybe a school photo or a community picnic. A large crowd of people posed in front of a modest building with ivy climbing up the walls. At the bottom, faint but readable, were the words, Sundew House, 1978. She typed it into her laptop. At first, nothing. Then, buried deep in an old article from a local digital archive, a headline, Mysterious Fire Destroys Sundew House, Orphanage Closes After 41 Years. Date, July 22nd, 1981. Sussex Herald. Her breath caught. She opened the article. The cause of the blaze remains unknown. Authorities say the fire began in the early morning hours and quickly engulfed the east wing. No fatalities were reported, but the home was permanently shuttered. Some records were salvaged, but most were lost in the flames. The director, a Mr. Reginald Abbott, declined to comment. Clara scanned the grainy photo at the top of the article. The building was the same. And there, near the edge of the crowd, was her face again. This time, a little older. No name listed. She leaned back, her breath shallow. The suitcase wasn't random. It was a breadcrumb trail, and someone, whoever had placed it at the station, had intended her to follow it. But why? And who was trying to stop her? By morning, the sky was the color of dishwater, thick with clouds that threatened a storm they never delivered. Clara hadn't slept. She'd barely moved. The suitcase sat at her feet, sealed again with its latches fastened like lips refusing to confess. She couldn't keep it here, not because she feared it, but because she feared what she might do with it if she gave herself too much time alone. The photos, the notebook, the documents, they pulsed with energy, calling her back to them over and over again like a name whispered just out of earshot. She needed answers, and someone who knew how to look for them. By 9 a.m., she was standing in the central archive room of Thornley University, surrounded by dust, hushed voices, and the subtle smell of old paper and carpet glue. The history department's lead archivist, Marla Devine, was already unlocking a storage cabinet when Clara arrived. They had met once at a writer's lecture. Clara remembered Marla's glasses, round and tinted slightly green, before she remembered her name. I brought something strange, Clara said, her voice low. Marla glanced over the top of her lenses. I assumed, since you asked for the university's private photo lab and not the main desk. Clara laid out a selection of photos from the suitcase across the table. 10 or so that featured her face, or the face of the woman she now called the double. Marla leaned in, her head tilting slowly. Is this you? I thought so at first, but some of these were taken before I was born. Marla examined the paper quality, then flipped one over with the corner of a gloved finger. Polaroid, 1972 or 73. No artificial aging on the ink. These are real. And that one. Clara held up the photo labeled Sundew House, 1978. Marla studied it carefully, running a small UV scanner across the surface. This wasn't published in any national newspaper, she said. It's likely local, maybe archived in a microfilm reel. But, her voice trailed off. This face, she pointed to Clara's double, shows up 3 times in the crowd. Look, here and here. Clara leaned closer. She hadn't seen it before. 3 versions of the same face, tucked into the crowd. Same bone structure, same posture. Different clothes, slightly different hair, different ages, but unmistakably the same woman, or at least the same template. Either this is a prank, Marla said slowly, or someone has gone to great lengths to make it look like you, or someone like you, appears in events spanning decades. She hesitated, then asked carefully, Clara, has anyone ever told you you were adopted? Clara's mouth opened, then closed. Number never. I asked once when I was a teenager because I don't look much like my parents, but they were adamant. Marla's gaze softened. You may want to ask again. She stepped away to pull a folder of reference materials from a nearby shelf. Clara stared at the triplicate faces in the photo. Her pulse quickened. How many versions of me are there? Marla returned with a directory of orphanage records. Most of these homes closed down in the 80s. Abuse scandals, funding cuts, fires. You said this was Sundew House? Clara nodded. Marla opened the folder, flipping through pages. Strange, that one's not listed. Not in the Sussex region, and not in any of the Home Office closures. It's like it never existed, outside of that article you found. They erased it? Clara asked. Marla frowned, or never meant for it to be found. She looked up sharply. Where did you get these again? Clara hesitated. I found a suitcase at Brighton Hill Station. Marla raised an eyebrow. And what did you do with it? I brought it home. You took it? The archivist's tone was hushed but stern. That's... Clara, you might have just walked into the middle of something very old and very well hidden. I didn't know what it was, Clara said. I still don't. Leave the photos here, Marla said, her voice lowering. I'll scan and catalog them, and I'll make some inquiries, quiet ones. Don't talk about this, not yet. Not unless you know who's listening. She left Thornley just after noon, a warm drizzle beginning to patter across the university's stone steps. The streets felt louder. Closer. Twice she looked over her shoulder. A man in a gray overcoat walked behind her for 3 blocks. A woman on a red bicycle circled the roundabout twice before pedaling off without signaling. Everyone was ordinary. And yet, not. By the time Clara reached her building, her hands were damp with sweat despite the cool air. She turned the key in the lock. The door creaked open and stopped. The lights were on. Her kitchen chair was tilted slightly. The suitcase was gone. Clara didn't move. She stood in the doorway, her key still gripped in her hand like a weapon, listening. No footsteps, no creaking floorboards. Just the steady buzz of the refrigerator and the soft tick of the hallway clock. But she knew, without question, someone had been here. She stepped inside cautiously, checking each room. Her apartment was small, living room, kitchen nook, bedroom, bath. No place to hide unless someone folded themselves into impossibilities. The window in the bedroom was open half an inch. The latch had been twisted loose. She didn't remember opening it. She closed and locked it with trembling fingers, then returned to the center of the living room. The suitcase was gone. So were the photos she hadn't taken to Thornley, the journal, the birth certificates. But nothing else had been touched. The place hadn't been ransacked or overturned, just edited, as if someone had known exactly what they were looking for and exactly what not to disturb. A ghost with surgical precision. Her throat was dry. She sat down slowly, her mind spinning through everything Marla had said. This wasn't just personal anymore. Someone wanted this history buried. The phone call, the missing suitcase. It wasn't paranoia if it was true. Clara took a shaky breath and stood. She'd go to the police. She'd say someone broke into her flat. She didn't need to mention the photos. Just report a theft, a break-in. It was the smart thing to do. But even as she reached for her phone, she hesitated. She already knew what they'd say. No forced entry, no evidence of a struggle. And what had been stolen? A suitcase she never claimed to own. She lowered the phone without dialing. Then she saw it. A white envelope slid under her front door. No stamp, no handwriting. She knelt and picked it up. Inside was a single photograph. She recognized the setting instantly. Sundew House, the ivy-covered building from the group photo. But this time, the image was empty. No crowd. No smiling children. Just the house in full daylight, its windows dark, its door ajar. The shadows in the photograph were long and angled. Morning light, maybe. On the back, in sharp block lettering, "Don't come here." Clara stared at it for a long time, and then turned it over again. In the bottom right corner, barely visible, was a faint smudge of ink, as if someone had started to write and changed their mind. It looked like the beginning of a name. See, before she could think too hard about it, her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Not private this time. A message. "I know who she is. Meet me. 8 p.m. The Pines Cafe, East Side. Come alone." Beneath it, a link to a blurry image. It was the Sundew House group photo, and her face, her double, had been circled in red. The Pines Cafe sat just off the main road like a pocket of the past, its faded awning sagging slightly, casting a shadow over mismatched patio chairs that hadn't been rearranged since spring. Inside, the lights were too yellow and the walls too green, but the air was warm and smelled of cinnamon and old wood. Clara arrived 15 minutes early. She chose a booth near the back, facing the door, her back against the wall. Her coat was damp from the drizzle that hadn't let up all afternoon. She ordered tea she wouldn't drink and tucked her hands under her thighs to keep them from trembling. The photo was still in her pocket, the one with the circled face. She had memorized it now. The girl circled in red, maybe 13 or 14, hair tied back, eyes squinting against the sun. It looked like her. Not just similar. Her, younger than she could ever remember being. As if someone had photographed her childhood from a distance she couldn't reach. At 8:02 p.m., the doorbell jingled. A man entered, mid-40s. Tired in the way people are when they've been carrying something too long. His clothes were neat, almost overly formal. A brown corduroy jacket, a blue button-down shirt. Shoes too clean for this part of town. He spotted her instantly and approached. "Clara Benton?" he asked. She nodded. He didn't offer a name, just slid into the booth across from her like a man who had been running toward this moment his whole life. "I thought you might not come," he said. His voice was low, kind, but measured, like everything he said had been revised before it left his lips. "I almost didn't." "Good instinct." She took out the photo and placed it between them. "This is me," she said quietly. "But it's not." The man nodded once. Her name was Claire Barlow, born 1972, registered to a family that didn't exist. Raised in Sundew House for 3 years, then she vanished. Clara stared at him. Vanished? Officially? She was placed with extended family. Unofficially? She was part of something called Program Winterglass. She blinked. That sounds made up. Oh, it was. That's the point. You can't trace a fake program. He opened his satchel and pulled out a folder. Newspaper clippings, redacted documents, a faded map with handwritten notations. "I used to work in records for the Home Office," he said. "Long time ago. Some files came across my desk that didn't make sense. People who had never been born, others who existed twice, paper trails that looped back into themselves." He pointed to a photo, a child's ID from 1975. Her face again, younger. "They reused identities," he said. "Test cases, human placeholders. I don't know why. No one I trusted ever wanted to talk about it, but I started collecting what I could before I left." "And now?" Clara asked. "Now I help people like you, when I find them, when they pop up again." "So what are you saying?" she asked, voice quiet. "That I'm not real?" He looked at her carefully. "I think you're real. I just don't think you're only Clara Benton. I think you were someone else first, maybe more than once." She felt her breath catch. "I have memories," she said, half defensive. A childhood. A life. I remember school, holidays, my parents. Of course you do. Memory's easy to shape, especially in children. You don't remember being 5, really. Not clearly. And if someone hands you a name and a birthday when you're small enough, you believe it. We all would. He passed her a second folder. Inside were 2 passports. One from the UK, 1984. One from East Berlin, 1986. Same face, same eyes, different names, different lives. Her hand shook slightly as she closed the folder. "Why now?" she asked. "Why show me this?" "Because someone went to your flat today, and someone sent you that warning. They've realized what you found. Or maybe they always knew where it would lead. And now, it's not safe for you to be alone." Clara's throat tightened. "You said people like me," she whispered. "How many are there?" He shook his head. "I've tracked 5. You're the 6th. What happened to them?" His eyes flicked to the window. 3 disappeared. 1 ended up in a psychiatric ward. 1 lives under an alias in South Africa. She doesn't talk to anyone anymore, but all of them said the same thing when they started digging. "What?" He leaned in. They dreamed of places they'd never been, and people they'd never met. Who knew their names? Clara sat in silence. Outside, the rain turned to mist. Inside, time seemed to narrow around the booth, like the cafe had become an echo chamber for the impossible. She reached for her coat. "I need to see it," she said. He blinked. "See what?" "Sundew House, the real one, if it's still standing." He hesitated, then nodded slowly. "All right," he said. "But you should know something first." "What?" "They burned it for a reason. They left London just after midnight, heading south through winding roads where the trees leaned too close to the lanes and the fog pooled in hollows like secrets too heavy to rise. Clara sat in the passenger seat of the man's modest silver hatchback, staring at the road, though her mind kept drifting toward the folders in the back seat. Her own face stared up from too many places. Documents, grainy ID cards, passport pages that bore names she didn't recognize but eyes she couldn't deny. The man finally introduced himself as Alistair Quinn, formerly of the Home Office Records Preservation Unit. Now just a name on no one's payroll, living between paper trails and other people's ghosts. "You've done this before?" she asked, breaking the silence. "I've gone back to Sundew, yes, twice. And I found ashes the first time, and silence the second." He didn't elaborate. They passed a sign, "Welcome to Harrow Vale." Established 1873. The town had once been known for its mineral springs and modest train station. Now it looked like any other quiet village in the dark. Shuttered shops, lamp-lit corners, the glint of rain on stone roads. Sundew House sat 2 miles past the town limits, behind a low hill and a copse of thin trees that looked brittle even in spring. Alistair parked the car in a gravel turnout. "No one's maintained it," he said. "Technically it's private land, but no one claims ownership anymore. The fire gutted most of it. What's left?" "Well, that depends on how much you believe in memory." They hiked up the hill in silence. The trees whispered in the wind. Restless, warning. At the top, Clara saw the skeleton of the building. Red brick and black scorch marks. Part of the roof had collapsed inward. Ivy had claimed what fire hadn't. The chimney leaned slightly, a crooked tooth in the mouth of a long-dead structure. Clara stepped toward it, boots crunching glass and stone. It smelled of damp earth and rusted memory. She walked through the front door, or where it had once been, and stopped inside what remained of a hallway. Peeling wallpaper curled inward like burnt parchment. The floor was layered in ash, dirt, and the green of new weeds reclaiming old space. Alistair watched her but said nothing. Something tugged at her, faint, internal. A pull behind her ribs. Not a memory. More like a phantom recollection, the kind that lives between dreams and déjà vu. She turned a corner and saw a mirror, still hanging crookedly in the hallway. Its glass was cracked, one long vein running through it like a scar. She stepped in front of it. Her reflection stared back, but not alone. Another face appeared for just a blink, just over her shoulder, before vanishing again. Her double, a flicker, like the mirror remembered someone who wasn't there anymore. Clara didn't scream. She didn't look away. Instead, she reached out and touched the glass. Behind her, Alistair called softly, "Found something." She followed his voice into what might have once been an office. The desk was mostly collapsed, but the metal filing cabinet beside it remained, rusted, stubborn. Alistair had pried the top drawer open with a crowbar. Inside, ash, paper pulp, melted bindings. But in the back, wedged behind warped metal, something white peeked through. Clara reached in carefully and pulled out a file folder, singed but intact. No name on the cover. She opened it. Inside were 3 documents. The first, a transfer order from the Department of Health and Social Security, dated 1978, requesting a subject be relocated to protect continuity of test identity. Subject, Claire Barlow. Alias to be created, Catherine Bell. The second, a medical assessment. Notes on reflex tests, memory imprinting, emotional suppression exercises. No signature, just initials, RH. The third, a grainy photograph clipped to a typed page. Clara looked at it. A girl strapped into a chair, wires on her temples, her mouth open in mid-cry, her face, hers. She dropped the file. It landed in the dust like a verdict. Alistair picked it up silently, his face unreadable. "We should go," he said quietly. Clara's voice came out hollow. "They did this to children." "Yes. To me." "Yes." "Why?" He paused. "I don't know. The people who started this, they're shadows now, hidden, dead, or somewhere far worse." They stepped back into the open air, and that's when Clara saw it. A figure, half shrouded in mist, standing at the edge of the tree line, watching. She squinted, tall, still, wearing something dark, maybe a coat or a uniform. But when she blinked, it was gone. The drive back to Harrow Vale was silent, except for the occasional squelch of tires on wet gravel and the rhythm of the windshield wipers. Clara sat with her arms wrapped around herself. The photograph of the girl in the chair seared into her memory. Mouth open in pain, eyes wide with betrayal, straps tight around her wrists like the truth being bound inside her. She didn't ask if the image was real. She knew it was. She'd seen the fear in that girl's face before, in the mirror, in dreams, in the stillness between thoughts she never understood. Alistair pulled into the parking lot behind a local pub with rooms above it. The Grey Lantern. It looked like the kind of place time had forgotten. Wood-paneled windows, a crooked neon sign buzzing faintly against the dark. "I booked us 2 rooms under aliases," he said. "Quieter here than the chain hotels, less digital footprint." Clara nodded, but her voice felt far away. "Is this what it's like? Knowing too much?" Alistair didn't answer immediately. He handed her a key. "It's like this for a while, until you make peace with what you find. Or you stop digging. And what if you can't stop?" His eyes flicked toward the trees in the distance. "Then you better hope the truth doesn't swallow you whole." That night, Clara didn't sleep. She sat on the windowsill of her small upstairs room, staring out into the fog, the journal in her lap and the girl's cry echoing faintly in her ears. Around 2 a.m., her phone buzzed. No ringtone, just a single vibration. She glanced at the screen. New message. "You are not the only one who remembers, but you may be the last one they'll allow to find out." Attached, a photo. Clara's breath hitched. It was her mother, Julia Benton, much younger, standing in a hospital hallway, holding a baby, not a posed photo, a surveillance shot, black and white. Time stamped, May 22nd, 1991, her own birth year. Clara zoomed in. A man stood just behind Julia. He was tall, dressed in a medical coat, but not facing the camera. Just enough of his profile was visible to send a shiver down her spine. She recognized him, the figure from the edge of the forest. "Who the hell are you?" she whispered. And then the phone buzzed again. New message. Ask your mother what happened to the first Clara. The next morning the rain had stopped, but the clouds hung low and heavy as Clara and Alistair drove back toward London. Clara said little, her eyes fixed out the window, watching hedgerows and mile markers blur into a gray ribbon of memory. "Are you sure?" Alistair asked gently. "I have to ask her," Clara said. "If she knows something, I need to hear it from her. She might lie. She might tell the truth. She might not even know." Clara exhaled. Or she might remember things she spent 30 years trying to forget. They arrived in Croydon just after noon. Clara didn't tell Alistair to come inside. He stayed in the car, engine idling, while she walked up the short path to the small white house that had been her childhood home. It looked the same. Neat, trimmed, normal. She knocked. Her mother opened the door in her gardening clothes, hands still damp with soil. "Clara," she said, blinking in surprise. "Darling, you didn't say you were visiting." "I didn't plan to." Julia stepped aside. "Come in, love. You look pale." Inside, the air smelled of lavender and lemon oil. Familiar, disarming. Like memory trying to soften the blow. Clara sat on the sofa. Her mother poured tea. When she returned, Clara slid the photo across the table. Julia's hand stopped mid-reach. Her face drained of color. "Where did you get this?" "You were holding me," Clara said. "But that's not what scares me. It's him." She pointed to the man in the background. "Who is he?" Julia didn't answer. "Who is he, Mum?" Her mother sat down slowly, eyes fixed on the photograph. After a long silence, she spoke. "I don't know his name," Julia whispered. "He wasn't on any of the staff records. He came before you were born, met me at the clinic, said there was a mistake in my chart, that the original records needed to be corrected." Clara's skin prickled. "What mistake?" Julia looked up. "You weren't the first." The quiet in the living room stretched out like a wire. Taut, vibrating with tension, neither of them dared touch too quickly. Clara leaned forward. "What do you mean? I wasn't the first?" Julia stared into her teacup as if the steam might lift the answer away for her. "There was another baby," she said finally. "I was pregnant with twins. That's what they told me early on. But at my 24-week scan, they said one of them didn't survive. No heartbeat. Fetal reabsorption, they called it. Nothing to be done." Clara's mouth went dry. "But when I delivered," her mother continued, "the birth was strange. I remember being sedated. You were born late, days past the due date. I never saw the delivery room. When I woke up, there was just you." She paused. "Except I overheard 2 nurses whispering outside my door. One of them said, 'They took the first one this time.'" Clara felt her stomach turn. "You think they took my twin?" Julia's voice trembled. "I've tried not to think about it for decades, because if I thought about it, I'd have to admit it might be true, that there's someone out there with your face, your blood, who was taken from me before I ever held her." She reached across the table and gripped Clara's hand. "I never told your father. Never told anyone. I was so scared. That man in the photo, he came back once, a year later, said he was checking up on your development. I told him to leave. He smiled and said, 'The second version seems to be progressing well.' Clara's voice cracked, and you just let it go. I didn't know who he was. No badge, no ID. And I was terrified. After that, we moved towns, changed jobs. I tried to put it behind me." Clara pulled her hand away gently, standing up. She needed air, space, a world that wasn't spinning. As she moved toward the door, her mother called after her. "There's a box," she said, "in the attic. Things they gave us when you were born, but not all of it was yours. Some of it, I never understood. It might help." 10 minutes later, Clara was in the attic, kneeling beside a dust-covered trunk. The box creaked open. Inside were hospital forms, cards from friends, a knitted blanket, and at the very bottom, tucked into a worn envelope, was a photograph she had never seen before. 2 babies, side by side, newborns, same eyes, same lips, same face. One marked with a pink bracelet, the other with nothing at all. Back in the car, Alistair watched her return. She handed him the photo without speaking. He studied it and gave a slow, knowing nod. "We have to find the first one," Clara said. He met her eyes. "I think," he said carefully, "you already have." The next morning brought a light so pale it felt borrowed. Gray sun filtered through fog, painting Clara's world in desaturated shades of everything. She hadn't slept. Her mind had broken loose of its usual paths, rerouting everything she thought she knew about her life. 2 babies, only one brought home. And maybe, just maybe, the wrong one. They drove back to Thornley University. Clara clutched the photograph of the twins as if it might fade if she loosened her grip. The silence between her and Alistair wasn't cold. It was shared, heavy, a mutual respect for how many fault lines had opened beneath her feet in less than 48 hours. Marla Devine met them at the university's back entrance, her face tight with worry. "You weren't followed?" she asked without greeting. "Not that we know of," Clara replied. Marla ushered them into the archives wing. Doors locked behind them, lights dimmed low. She led them to a room Clara had never seen before. Inside, it was silent as a mausoleum. A single overhead bulb buzzed faintly. The walls were lined with mirrors, floor to ceiling, each pane slightly warped at the edges. It gave the room a haunted symmetry, like every movement might echo forever in the wrong direction. Clara turned slowly in the center. "Why are we here?" she asked. Marla motioned toward the mirrors. "This was part of a psychological observation study in the 60s, she explained. "The lab was abandoned years ago, but I've been using the space for less official projects, the kind that disappear when you log them in the system." She held up a tablet and swiped through scanned photographs. Clara's face again and again, under different names. Some had timestamp overlays. Others looked like medical stills. One even had notes scribbled beside the image. "Test number 4, subject, CB, no anomalies detected. Memory integrity holding. Fails to detect repetition across placements." Clara pointed to the last line. "What does that mean?" Alistair answered. "It means they ran you through the same environments, more than once. Different homes, different names, same setup, to see how memory and identity formed, or fractured. They wanted to break us?" "No," Marla said softly. "They wanted to build you, and you broke anyway." Clara's hands curled into fists. She had walked through her life thinking her choices were her own, that her memories, flawed and imperfect as they were, belonged to her. Now she wasn't sure they hadn't been installed. Marla pulled something else from her bag, a set of microfiche slides. "These are from a private archive. I had to bribe a retired officer in Devon to get them. They're notes from Winterglass." She pointed to a line on one of the faded blue slides. "Subject 1 has survived contact with Subject 6. No memory convergence detected. Both remain unaware." Clara stared at the line. "Who's Subject 6? You. And Subject 1. Marla hesitated. "That's the part I'm afraid you're about to find out." Outside, the wind shifted. A shadow moved behind the frosted glass window of the archive hallway and stopped. By the time Clara returned to her flat, The sky had darkened into a dull steel sheet, pressing low over the city like a migraine that hadn't broken yet. Alistair had dropped her off a few blocks away to avoid drawing attention. He always did that, acted as if someone, somewhere, might be watching. It was paranoia, until it wasn't. Her mailbox was ajar. Clara paused. She always locked it. Inside was a small black box, no return address, wrapped in brown paper. Tucked beneath it, a folded note. No envelope, no signature, just one sentence in block handwriting. "You have to remember what they made us forget." Clara looked up and down the street. Empty, quiet. She took the box inside and double-locked the door. Her hands moved carefully, peeling away the brown paper. Inside was a brass key, old but well-polished, attached to a chain of blue thread that had frayed at the edges. A mirror shard had been tucked beneath it, wrapped in tissue paper. And beneath that, a letter, typed on worn paper. The edges smelled faintly of cedar and mildew, like it had been hidden somewhere for a long time. "Clara, you don't know me, but I know you. We've been the same person more times than they'd ever admit. They broke us into versions, test cases, echoes. I was the first. They called me Subject 1, Claire Barlow. They erased me, but I didn't stay gone. I found ways to leave pieces behind, clues they wouldn't think to erase. You're the only one who's made it this far. If you're reading this, you've already begun to remember. The mirror is part of it. There's a room. You'll know it when you see it. The key opens a door they buried, beneath the old rail station at Whitcroft. Look for the blue door. They watched us, but we watched them too. Be careful who you trust, especially the ones who helped you get here." CB Clara read it 3 times, her heart pounding harder with each pass. The blue thread, the key, the mirror. A buried door under a rail station. It sounded like madness. Until she remembered the photo that started it all, found at Brighton Hill Station. The suitcase, the girl with her face. Whitcroft was 1 town over, less than an hour away. She turned the mirror shard in her hand. It wasn't glass from her apartment. She would have noticed if something had broken. It was old, the silvering faded at the edges. She brought it to the light, and for a moment, the reflection didn't align. It showed her face, but older, sharper, eyes heavier. It blinked. Clara dropped it with a gasp. The shard clattered against the table and rolled into her palm again like a coin finding its owner. She swallowed hard and grabbed her bag. She needed to see the place, to find the door, to follow the map carved in cryptic warnings in broken glass. Whatever lay beneath Whitcroft Station, it was waiting. The train to Whitcroft was nearly empty. It was late, just past 10 p.m., and the fluorescent lights in the carriage buzzed with a lazy kind of menace. Clara sat in the farthest seat from the door, her coat drawn tightly around her, the brass key clutched in one pocket and the mirror shard wrapped in tissue in the other. Her reflection in the window stared back at her, slightly distorted by the glass. She caught herself tilting her head, trying to see if the version in the reflection blinked out of time again. It didn't. Not yet. The train pulled into Whitcroft Station at 10:47 p.m. The platform was old. No digital signs, no automated announcements. Just a single swinging light near the ticket office and a long stretch of disused platform littered with leaves and rust. Clara stepped out into the night. The wind here smelled different, older, like damp stone and copper, something underground. She moved past the locked doors of the main station and followed the concrete edge to the far end, where maintenance sheds and signal boxes stood like forgotten sentries. And there it was, a blue door, hidden behind a tangle of ivy and metal piping. Not vibrant blue, faded, worn to the hue of a bruise, with peeling paint revealing metal beneath. There was no handle, only a keyhole. Clara pulled the brass key from her coat. It slid in smoothly. Click. She paused, just for a second, hand on the frame. Be careful who you trust. The letter's words echoed in her mind. She told Alistair nothing of this trip. She hadn't messaged Marla. It felt right. Necessary. The door groaned open. Inside, darkness thick and close. A staircase descended steeply, the air cold and stale. She turned on her phone's flashlight and stepped into the past. The corridor was narrow, lined with tile that had once been white, but now wore a coat of mold and soot. Clara moved carefully, past doors with frosted glass, past rusted cabinets bolted into concrete. A maintenance tunnel. Maybe once part of a wartime shelter or storage for the railway. But now it felt purposed, like someone had built it for a reason. At the end of the hall, she reached a heavy steel door. Bolted shut. But there was no lock, only a keypad. She stared. No code. Except... She pulled out the letter again. The paper smelled of smoke and cedar. She ran her finger along the margin. Something caught her nail. A faint indentation. Not ink. Pressure. She held the paper under her flashlight and tilted it just right. 4 numbers. 1-9-7-2. Claire Barlow's birth year. She typed it in. A loud mechanical clunk, followed by a hiss of compressed air. The door swung open on hydraulic hinges. Inside was a room like none she had expected. Fluorescent lights flickered to life. It wasn't a lab, or a cell, or a bunker. It was a recreation room, the kind you'd see in a school or a foster care home. A round table with mismatched chairs, a television mounted on the wall. A faded mural of a forest painted across one wall, done in cartoonish trees and wide-eyed animals. Everything was dusty but intact, preserved. In the corner was a small mirror, freestanding, cracked in the middle. Beside it, a file cabinet, and on the table, a television remote. Clara approached it slowly. The screen flickered to life as she neared, static at first. Then a menu. Archive playback mode, subject file 01C. The cursor hovered over. Play, begin playback. Clara sat down and pressed the button. The screen filled with a video feed, grainy like an old security tape. A girl sat at the table, 10 years old maybe. Same green eyes, same small scar near her left eyebrow. Her. The younger version of herself, Claire, maybe, sat in a chair, swinging her legs. She smiled at someone off camera. Then she spoke. They said I've had 6 names, the girl said brightly. But this one's my favorite. A pause, then, I hope this version sticks. Clara felt her breath leave her. On screen, the girl reached toward the camera, as if touching the person behind it. If you're watching, maybe you're the one who made it. The one who got out. If you are, remember, they don't stop watching, even after you're gone. Especially after. The screen went black. Then a line of text appeared. No further recordings found. Clara sat motionless in the dim light of the room. Dust floated in the beam of her flashlight. The girl's voice echoed in her chest like a heartbeat skipping the wrong rhythm. 6 names. 1 face. 1 version that finally remembered. The silence after the video ended was oppressive. Clara didn't move. Not at first. Her mind worked furiously behind a mask of stillness, replaying the girl's words over and over like a riddle etched in her bones. I hope this version sticks. The sentence carried a child's innocence, but it was far from simple. It was loaded. A message wrapped in a smile. Clara felt it. Not just a goodbye, but a handoff. The girl in the video, Claire Barlow, the first, had known someone would follow her, and she had wanted that someone to remember. Clara stood slowly and scanned the room again. Her eyes landed on the old metal file cabinet in the corner. 3 drawers, 2 rusted shut. The bottom one moved, With a grunt and a cloud of dust, she pried it open. Inside, folders, each labeled with a name and a number. Subject 02A, Subject 03B, Subject 06C. Her fingers hovered, then pulled the file marked Subject File 06C, C. Benton. She opened it. The contents were minimal. A single-page summary. Subject 06C, Clara Benton. Status: live. Memory integration successful. Emotional instability within expected range. Notes: subject exhibits higher than average curiosity. Early contact with subject, one observed. Outcome: continue monitoring, intervention likely if file recovered. Authorization: code RH-05. The initials again, RH. The same that had signed the Claire Barlow file. Whoever that was, they weren't just running the program. They were still pulling strings. Clara stared at the outcome line. Intervention likely if file recovered. They knew. They always knew. And if she had it now, intervention was coming. She stuffed the document into her coat pocket, heart hammering. Time to go. She retraced her steps quickly, past the mirrors, past the cartoon mural, past the table where her childhood had left her a message like a planted seed. At the bottom of the stairs, she paused, hand on the steel door that led back into the maintenance corridor. Something was wrong. Too quiet, too still. Her phone vibrated in her coat pocket. Blocked number, one message. You were never supposed to open that file. Then a second. But now that you have, we'll meet again. Soon. Clara pushed open the door and stepped into the corridor, and stopped cold. Someone stood at the top of the stairwell, a silhouette, backlit by a single emergency light. Not Alistair. Too tall, shoulders broad beneath a dark coat, a hat tilted just enough to shadow the face, but even from a distance, Clara recognized the stance. She had seen it once in a photograph, in the background behind her mother. RH. The man didn't move, didn't speak. Clara took a step backward, hand tightening around the mirror shard in her coat. "Who are you?" she called up the stairs. The man didn't answer. Instead, he turned slowly and walked away. No rush, no panic, just the certainty of someone who knew he didn't have to run. When Clara emerged into the night, the blue door slammed shut behind her like a secret retreating underground. She didn't look back. Not yet. But in her chest, something had changed. She was no longer just chasing a mystery. Now, the mystery was chasing her. Clara didn't go home. She got off the train 2 stops early, ducked into a 24-hour diner just outside Norwich Square, and found a booth in the far back corner where she could watch the door. She didn't order anything. Her phone was off. Her coat still smelled like rust and old paper. She hadn't spoken since leaving Whitcroft. Now she was waiting. For clarity, for courage, for Alistair. He arrived just after 2 a.m., his jacket damp from the night air, his eyes tired. He slid into the seat across from her without a word, sensing before she spoke that something had shifted. "I went to Whitcroft," Clara said flatly. "Found the blue door." Alistair's mouth pressed into a line, but he didn't interrupt. "I saw her. Claire Barlow. There was a video. She left it for me. She called herself the first, said they were watching, even after we were gone." He nodded once. "They are. And I found my file. Subject 06C. It said I was being monitored. That intervention was likely if I found it." Clara leaned in. "Someone was waiting for me. At the top of the stairs. Same man from the hospital photo. I think he's the one signing off on the files. Initials. RH. Alistair inhaled sharply, then looked down at his hands. Clara's voice hardened. "You know who that is, don't you?" He hesitated. Then, slowly, Dr. Roderick Hale, one of the lead architects of Project Winterglass. Officially died in a car crash in 1993. He didn't. "No," Alistair said. "He didn't." Clara stared at him. "You knew this was more than memory manipulation, more than identity reassignment. You knew it was genetic, didn't you? Alistair's silence was confirmation. Say it, Clara demanded. Say what you know. He looked up, his voice low. You're not a twin, Clara. You're a clone. The word hung between them like a blade. Clara didn't react at first. Her body went still, not with shock, but recognition, like the last piece of a puzzle clicking into place. You're telling me I was created, grown, in vitro, from genetic material taken from Claire Barlow. You're the 6th replication, the most stable one. Why? She asked. Because they wanted to test if identity was inherited, not just biologically, but experientially. If memory, trauma, instincts could be passed down. Like psychological inheritance. He nodded. If one version of you could be shaped by certain environmental inputs, would another version respond the same way? Would she ask the same questions, make the same decisions? And when she doesn't, she becomes dangerous. Clara sat back, her thoughts racing. Does my mother know? Number Julia Benton was recruited as a placement host, given a baby that wasn't hers, but had her records overwritten to make it seem natural. She was told you were a medical miracle, that her embryo had been preserved and reimplanted. Clara blinked hard, her voice breaking. So she really believed I was hers. She raised you like her own, and in every way that matters, you are. Silence again. Then Clara reached into her coat and pulled out the photograph from the file. Claire Barlow, strapped to the chair. They did this to a child, she said, and then they repeated it, over and over. Alistair nodded. Claire was the first. You're the last. Not the last, Clara said. There was a note, a line in the file. Survived contact with subject 1. That means she's alive. Alistair stiffened. She was presumed dead, he said slowly. After escaping a facility in Germany, burned records, no confirmation. She's alive, Clara said again. And she's trying to help me. Outside the diner, a dark van rolled slowly past the windows. Its windows were blacked out, its lights off. Clara noticed. So did Alistair. He turned to her. We need to move, now. The van didn't follow. It didn't need to. The way it moved, slow, deliberate, as if marking presence rather than pursuit, was more effective than a chase. It told Clara everything she needed to know. They were watching again, and this time, they weren't hiding it. Alistair led her through a maze of side streets and alleyways. They didn't speak. Not until they reached an underground car park, damp and half-lit, where an old motorcycle waited beneath a canvas tarp. You know how to ride? He asked. Clara shook her head. Good, he said, handing her a helmet. Then hold on. They left the city in silence, weaving through back roads, cutting between lorries and night buses, flying through the borderlands of memory and fog. By the time the sun began to rise, staining the sky with pale oranges and ghost blue, they were deep in the countryside, far from digital signal towers and train lines. They reached a small, weathered cottage tucked into the side of a wooded hill. Vines covered the roof. No power lines connected to the house. The mailbox bore no name. Alistair knocked once, twice, then stepped back. A small panel in the door slid open. 2 eyes peered through. They lingered on Clara. Then, password. Alistair responded, no version lasts forever. A click. The door opened. Inside, the house smelled of cedar and books. The air was warm, lived in but alert. A woman in her 60s stood at the threshold, gray hair braided down her back, sharp eyes narrowed in suspicion. Clara, Alistair said. This is Dr. Elspeth Corrin. She worked on the outside of Winterglass, caught wind of the experiments and walked away before it collapsed. The woman gave a curt nod. I walked away before it burned. She led them to a narrow sitting room, where the windows had been bricked over and a kettle whistled faintly in the corner. You're the 6th, Elspeth said, sitting across from Clara. I wondered if I'd ever meet you. You knew about the replications? Elspeth's mouth tightened. I fought to shut them down. Clara pulled the photo from her pocket. The girl in the chair. Elspeth's face changed. A flicker of pain. That's Claire, she said. The original. They tested her over and over. Memory recall? Pain, resistance, emotional disruption. She broke, but not the way they wanted. She started remembering between sessions, retained identity across resets. That terrified them. They said she escaped. She did, Elspeth said. She took a drive file, filled with records, video logs, name maps, genetic notes. I helped her. You helped her escape. I helped her vanish. She stood and crossed the room to a bookshelf, pulled a weathered box from behind it. Inside were pages. Journal entries written in tight cursive, some smudged, some water-damaged, but all signed the same way. CB Clara ran her fingers over the paper. Each entry was like a ripple across time. June 14th. Version 3 didn't last. She remembered too much too fast. They terminated her on site. No ceremony, no record. I watched it happen through a mirror I pretended not to see through. June 20th. They want obedience. Not curiosity, but curiosity is all I have left. I think that's why she, the next one, has it too. Maybe it's genetic, maybe it's me, still trying. One entry had a map, a crude one, marked South Point School, lower wing. Clara stared. What is this? Elspeth looked away. One of the replication sites, before it was burned. Not just a school. It housed the versions, trained them, observed them. And what's there now? Nothing, Elspeth said, unless someone's still using it. Clara folded the page and slipped it into her coat. Then, without warning, she staggered slightly, hands trembling. Alistair caught her. Clara? I'm fine, she said, but her face had gone pale. She sat down. A tremor ran through her fingers. Elspeth watched with knowing eyes. It's starting. What is? Clara asked. Destabilization. Your body wasn't designed to last indefinitely. None of the versions were. Clara didn't speak for a long time after Elspeth's words settled into the silence. Your body wasn't designed to last indefinitely. Not a warning, a statement. Like a doctor explaining a terminal condition the patient had already guessed. Alistair leaned forward, his voice tight. What does that mean exactly? Elspeth didn't blink. The early clones, Clara included, weren't made to endure long-term replication stress. Too many variables, unstable telomeres, mitochondrial drift. English, please. It means, she said, turning to Clara, your cells are breaking down faster than they should. Subtly at first, but eventually, organ failure, neurological degradation, loss of motor control. Clara's throat went dry. How long? Elspeth exhaled. Depends how much strain you're under. But if you've already started showing tremors... She paused. Weeks, maybe less. Alistair swore under his breath and stood, pacing. But there's a chance, Elspeth added, softer now. If Claire left the drive behind, her version of the Winterglass database, it may contain a stabilization protocol, a therapy, maybe even reversal notes. Clara looked up. You said she took it with her. She did. And if her journal's right, she left a copy buried at South Point School. In the wing, they never let the handlers access. That's where we go, Clara said, rising slowly. But her balance faltered again. This time, it was worse. Her vision blurred, like her brain forgot how to center the world. Alistair caught her again. His hands stayed firm on her shoulders this time. You're not going anywhere until we know it's safe. But Elspeth was already moving, pulling a medical bag from beneath a cabinet. I can help you for now. I have a serum that slows the breakdown, meant for emergency cases. Won't fix the problem, but it'll buy us a little time. Clara nodded numbly. watching as the doctor drew the liquid into a glass syringe. The needle slid into her arm. Coolness rushed through her veins like light filtered through snow. For a moment, she remembered being 6. A doctor's room, bright white walls, a voice saying, "This won't hurt." She had assumed it was a vaccine. Now she wondered if it was an update. They left just before dawn. Alistair drove. Elspeth stayed behind, her last words ringing in Clara's ears. "If you find her, tell her the first version still matters." It took 4 hours to reach South Point. The town surrounding the school had long since hollowed out. Abandoned petrol stations, broken shop fronts, graffiti aging in slow, flaking curls. The school itself sat behind rusted gates, large, Gothic, a former private institution repurposed into a government retraining center during the late 70s. Closed in 1992 after a fire gutted its west wing. Locals called it haunted. Tourists didn't come. Clara stood before the gates, clutching the folded map from Claire's journal. "Lower wing," she murmured. They climbed the fence and crossed the overgrown yard, boots crunching glass and bone-dry leaves. A single bird called somewhere far off. Then silence again. Inside, the school was colder than outside, as if it had swallowed the heat and refused to give it back. Classrooms still bore chalkboards. Names were scrawled on desks, old paper crumbling in open lockers. And then a smell. Smoke, not old, fresh. Alistair held up a hand. They moved toward the stairwell. Claire's map had marked it clearly. But just as Clara reached the top step, she saw it. Firelight, flickering down the hallway. Someone else was already here, burning the evidence. The flames were controlled, but deliberate. Small fires burning at the corners of old filing cabinets, along the edges of lab folders. It wasn't chaos. It was surgical. Clara and Alistair moved fast, keeping low. The hallway ahead glowed with a flicker of destruction. Shadows shifted across walls like ghosts trying to escape before they too were consumed. And then she saw him. The man from the stairwell. Broad shoulders, heavy coat. Same stillness, like a sculpture half turned toward violence. R.H. He was kneeling before a black safe bolted into the floor near the old supply room door, feeding files into a flame-proof case, smoke curling gently around him. Clara didn't hesitate. "Step away from it." Her voice came out louder than expected, too loud for how her hands trembled. The man turned slowly, not startled, just acknowledging. He didn't look surprised to see her. His voice was like sandpaper across silk. "You weren't meant to last this long." Clara took a step closer. "But I did. You weren't built to survive discovery. You were built to resolve into silence." Alistair stepped forward, gun raised, an old revolver from his coat. "Back away from the safe." Hale's gaze flicked to the weapon, unimpressed. "I built 6 of you," he said, "and only one of you was curious enough to disobey instructions hardwired into your nervous system." "That's why you fear me," Clara said. "Number. That's why you fascinate me." He stood, and then he smiled. "But it ends here." Before he could reach for the case again, a crash echoed through the hallway. The floor gave way. A blast, controlled, precise, detonated beneath the corridor. Hale stumbled. So did Clara. The world tilted. Smoke surged upward. Clara screamed as the floor vanished beneath her feet, and she dropped through the collapsing hallway, slamming into something hard, stone or steel, then blackness. She came to in pitch dark. Alistair's voice called out, strained. "Clara! Clara! Are you all right?" She coughed, pain stabbing her ribs. "I'm okay," she rasped. "I think." The flashlight rolled nearby. She grabbed it, flicked it on. She was in a basement corridor, undisturbed, sealed. She turned and gasped. There, just beyond a rusted security door, was a glass room. Inside were beds, monitors, and photographs lined along the walls like trophies. Every one of them her face. Different expressions, different ages, same eyes. On the far wall, a whiteboard bore the word, Convergence. And below it, she will either collapse or remember. The case Hale had been packing had fallen near her. It had cracked open. Inside, metal discs, drives, each labeled 01A, Claire Barlow, unaltered memory, core 06C, Clara Benton, stable drift copy. She reached for the first. Taped to it was a note, scrawled in shaky handwriting. Clara, if you've made it here, I failed to stop them, but you might not. This is the memory I was trying to protect. Mine, yours, ours. Don't run. Remember? Clara clutched the drive to her chest. For the first time, she didn't feel afraid of what she'd find. She felt ready. Ready to remember everything. The safe house was silent except for the steady hum of the old generator Elspeth had rigged beneath the floorboards. Clara sat cross-legged on a worn rug, the laptop screen in front of her flickering as the decryption program worked its way through layers of outdated encryption protocols. The drive, labeled 01A, Claire Barlow, unaltered memory core, had begun to pulse faintly when connected, not mechanically, rhythmically, like it was alive. Across the room, Alistair sat in the shadows, his hand still wrapped in a makeshift bandage from the school collapse. He said nothing. He hadn't spoken much since they'd pulled themselves out of the ruins of South Point and driven through the night with their lives packed into a duffel bag and a single hard drive that might be worth more than all of them combined. The screen blinked. Decryption complete file set. Claire Barlow : primary mem chain. Format: Visual Audio Memory Simulation, VAMS. Clara swallowed. She clicked play. Clara hit play again. The screen filled once more with Claire's face. Only this time, she wasn't speaking to the camera. She was speaking to someone off-screen. The angle was tilted, as if the device recording her had been hastily placed or forgotten. Her voice was urgent. You don't understand. She wasn't part of the original replication cycle. Hale said she was corrective architecture, not a clone, not exactly. More like a final convergence, a failsafe. They made her from fragments, pieces of us, memory imprints, personality codes from all 6 versions. She's everyone, but also no one. The image stuttered again. Artifacting, a shimmer across her face like an old tape degrading under the weight of its own truth. If she wakes up, she'll carry all of us inside her. Not just data, memory, pain, instinct, but no anchor, no identity to hold it. She won't survive that, and neither will we. Claire stood and crossed the frame, voice lowered. She's not a person, she's a conclusion. The screen went black. Then a final image flashed, a set of coordinates, stamped in white against black. 52.9134 degrees north, 0.7428 degrees east. Winterglass Site 7, holding facility restricted. Clara paused the video. Her hands were cold, her mouth dry. She turned to Alistair, who had gone very, very still. Where is that? She asked. He answered without checking a map. Norfolk, near the coast, remote farmland, off any public grid. You know it? I know of it, he said darkly. It was never acknowledged in any official documentation. No funding trails, no surveillance logs, just a name. Site 7, the blackest hole in the Winterglass archive. Clara stood, her body still sore from the collapse at South Point, but her mind sharp. If Claire was telling the truth, then the 7th version, this final echo, isn't just unstable, she's a loaded weapon. Alistair nodded grimly. And if Hale is trying to cover his tracks, he may already be on his way there. Clara grabbed her coat. We go now. 2 hours later. northern Norfolk. The road turned from asphalt to gravel, then from gravel to weeds. Old hedgerows lined either side, curling like withered fingers reaching for forgotten trespassers. The GPS dropped signal 5 miles back. Their only guide now was a paper map, traced from Claire's files, with a red circle inked hastily near a place called Carrick Field. They stopped when the car could go no further. A rusted gate blocked the path ahead, its chain thick with corrosion. They stepped over it. What lay beyond was not a building. It was a field, flat, empty. At first. Then Clara saw it. A sliver of metal, just a shimmer, half buried in the ground. They approached. It wasn't debris. It was a hatch. The hatch opened with the reluctant hiss of disturbed secrets. Clara stepped down first, flashlight sweeping across a staircase carved from reinforced concrete, lined with rails wrapped in decaying rubber. The air was dry, sterile, cold enough that her breath fogged with each exhale. "This place isn't abandoned," she whispered. "No," Alistair said from behind her. They left it ready. They reached the bottom after 40 steps. A reinforced door waited. On its steel face, a faded stencil barely visible. Winterglass, Site 7, Cognitive Integrity Division, Convergence Wing. The words sounded like nonsense, like something invented to obscure function. But they both understood. This wasn't a research lab. It was a containment zone. Alistair pried open the door. Inside, emergency lights flickered on, dull red, bathing the corridor in a heartbeat rhythm. Clara followed the strobe of memory. Signs on the wall read like pages torn from a psychological horror script. Genetic filter room sensory neutrality, chamber cognition sync tunnel, and finally, convergence room authorized access only. RH level 9. Clara paused in front of the door. Her hand hovered over the latch. "What does RH level 9 mean?" she asked. Alistair's voice was flat. "Roderick Hale, level 9 access. He built this. He sealed it." Clara pulled the latch. The door opened with a shudder. Inside, a vast circular chamber, completely silent. No flickering, no alarms, just 6 mirrors aligned along the walls in a perfect hexagon. In front of each one, a chair. Thin restraints dangled from the arms like spiderwebs. And in the center, a cryostasis pod, vertical, humming faintly. Inside floated a girl, her face but leaner, sharper, eyes closed, hair longer. But there was something else. Even in stillness, even submerged in fluid and frost, the girl's presence was crushing, as if all the energy that had once been divided among 6 versions had now been poured into one final vessel. Alistair stepped back. "My God." Clara approached the pod. A placard on its base read, Subject 7, Echo Unit. Fully integrated cognitive convergence, CB01 through CB06. Status, dormant. Stability, unknown. Do not initiate without RH authorization. Clara stared into the face of the girl in the pod. "She's all of us," she murmured. Claire, Catherine, Elise, Mara, Josephine, and herself. Names the system had tried to bury under numbers, but they were in there, layered, looping, alive. A terminal beside the pod blinked to life. Voice initiation recognized. Subject 06. C. "Would you like to wake Subject 7? Clara's hand hovered over the screen. Alistair took a step forward. "Clara, think about what she is." "I am. You wake her, and she could collapse, or worse, override you. She might also remember what I can't." She touched the screen. The terminal glowed. Processing, stasis disengaging. The lights in the room dimmed. The hum changed. The fluid inside the pod began to drain. The cryopod hissed open with a slow, wet gasp. Subject 7 collapsed forward, caught in Clara's arms before her knees touched the floor. She was freezing, skin pale, limbs slack, hair clinging to her neck like ribbons of shadow. Her eyes fluttered, then opened, and locked directly onto Clara's, not with confusion, not with fear, with recognition. "Lena," she whispered. Clara froze. "That's not my name," she said, but her voice cracked on the last word. Subject 7, who looked like Clara but was not Clara, smiled faintly. "It was. Once, before you were divided." Alistair stepped forward, cautiously. "How do you know that name?" The girl turned to him, slower now, grounding herself. "I remember you. You carried version 2 out of the Belfast collapse. You were smaller then, more afraid." His eyes widened. "That's not possible. You weren't even—" "I was all of them," Subject 7 said. "I don't just remember what they did. I am what they did." The 6 mirrors on the wall lit up, each flashing an image. Claire, age 9, screaming behind one-way glass. Catherine standing in a white corridor, being told her parents never existed. Elise, convulsing after an experimental memory overwrite. Mara, running through a forest, covered in blood not her own. Josephine, reading from a script while tears streamed down her face. Clara, herself, standing at the edge of a lake, holding a photo she didn't understand. And then, the center of the room glowed. A 7th image, the girl who now stood among them. But in this one, she wasn't alone. Roderick Hale stood beside her, hand on her shoulder like a puppeteer resting between performances. Clara's breath caught. "He raised you," she said quietly. Subject 7 nodded. "Built me from your ruins." "You remember everything?" She didn't answer, because the door at the far end of the chamber opened. Footsteps, slow, crisp, and there he was. Hale, older now, paler, his coat long and gray, but his presence hadn't aged a day. He stepped into the convergence room like a man entering church. "You did it," he said, voice soft. "I always wondered which version would survive long enough to make the choice." Clara stood in front of Subject 7. "She's not yours anymore." Hale gave a small, sad smile. "She was never mine. She was the program. She was the culmination of 30 years of work, failure, and correction. You think I wanted to make a monster? I wanted to build a solution." "To what?" Alistair growled. "To human error," Hale replied. "To grief, to confusion, to war. We tried everything, politics, religion, technology, but people break. I wanted to see if we could build someone who couldn't." Subject 7 stepped forward now, her voice steady. "And instead, you built someone who could never stop remembering the ones you broke first." Clara reached into her coat, pulled out Claire's final drive. "This isn't just data," she said. "It's testimony. It's confession," Hale replied. "From a child who didn't understand her purpose." "No," Clara said. "From a girl who wasn't supposed to survive, and still did." Hale's face changed, just slightly. "You're here to end it, then?" Clara glanced at the mirrors, at every face that had come before her. "No," she said. "We're here to release it." She tossed the drive into the center console. The terminal lit up. All memory files merging. Convergence commenced. Warning. Unstable integrity expected. Subject 7 looked to Clara. "What happens if I can't hold it?" Clara took her hand. "Then we fall apart, together." The lights pulsed white. The chamber filled with voices, with names, with lives. The mirrors cracked, not shattered, but split open like skin finally allowed to breathe. And Roderick Hale, his life's work unraveling around him, turned and walked out, alone. The lights didn't flicker this time. They surged. A cascade of white flooded the convergence room as the mirrors pulsed in sync with the humming terminal at the chamber's center. It wasn't electricity. Not entirely. It was something deeper, older. Like memory itself had become a power source. Clara felt it first. A pull behind her ribs, a tightening at the base of her skull. Then came the voices. Not spoken, but layered, whispering in strands of thought that weren't hers but sounded like her. You were the one that ran. No, I stayed. I obeyed. I begged them to let me go. I lied to escape. I remembered too much. I remembered nothing. We are all the same girl. Clara dropped to her knees, palms against the floor. The concrete was warm now, vibrating faintly beneath her. Subject 7 stood in the middle of the convergence ring, eyes wide and glowing, not with light, but with presence. She was receiving the memory chain all at once, not piece by piece, not like a story, like a flood. She blinked, once, slowly, and then her voice changed, not in tone, in identity. "I'm Claire," she said. "No, I'm Catherine. Wait, Josephine. No, I'm Clara. I think I'm Clara." Her knees buckled. Clara lunged forward, catching her before she hit the floor. "Don't fight it," she whispered, forehead against hers. "Let it pass through you." The mirrors began to crack, thin spiderwebs of fracture crawling across their surfaces, not breaking, shedding, like a shell finally done protecting what had grown inside. Alistair, standing at the terminal, swore under his breath. "We've got a problem." Clara turned. Facility override. Initiated. Ayrshire Protocol 1. A engaged. Estimated containment failure, 28 minutes. Subject 7 stirred in Clara's arms. Her eyes were clearer now, but her voice was flat. "He didn't leave. He went to the next site." "What next site?" "The other one," she said. "The real convergence. This was the decoy. A memory vault." Alistair scanned the terminal, fingers flying across keys. "Coordinates just updated," he said. "A second facility, buried under something called Ashdown Orphanage." Clara's heart turned to stone. "That's where Claire was first registered." Subject 7 looked up. "That's where I was built." They had 26 minutes before the facility purged itself. Physically, digitally, biologically. Long enough to escape, not long enough to undo what Hale was about to finish. Clara helped Subject 7 to her feet. She was steady now, no longer fractured. "I can feel all of them," she whispered. "And they're not fighting anymore." Clara squeezed her hand. "Good, because we'll need every one of us." They ran. Up through the winding stairwell, past the trembling metal walls and the flickering red lights, past the dying hum of machines surrendering their secrets to fire. Site 7 was unraveling, not in chaos, but in precision. A designed death, like the place had been waiting for this day. Clara felt the pressure behind her eyes tighten again. Subject 7 was silent beside her, keeping pace without breathlessness, as though the strain of memory convergence had built something stronger inside her. Alistair reached the exit panel first. The hatch creaked open. Outside, the cold air hit them like a second wind. The sky above Carrick Field was dark with cloud. A low mechanical groan echoed beneath them, a warning. Clara turned, just once, to look at the field. Nothing remained above ground, but she knew the entire truth was burning beneath it. They drove. East, fast, through empty farm roads and skeletal villages, toward a name Clara hadn't heard in years. Ashdown. A rural orphanage decommissioned in 1996 after a structural fire. She remembered it in flashes now, because they weren't just memories anymore. They were shared memory. Subject 7's presence beside her was like a radio tower, boosting everything that had been buried inside Clara's mind. At a service station just outside Kingsmill, Alistair pulled over to check the coordinates. Clara stepped out for air. The cold wind cut across her like a blade, but she didn't shiver. She closed her eyes. And it happened again. A cascade. A vision not hers, but Claire's. The hallway was lined with doors, each one labeled only by numbers. Behind one, a girl sobbed. Behind another, silence. Claire walked slowly, hand pressed to the wall for balance. She wore no shoes. She passed a door marked 06. It was ajar. Inside, a body lay still, pale, eyes open but empty. Heron, not a metaphor, a mirror, a failed copy. The voice behind her whispered, "Not this one." "We'll try again." Clara gasped and stumbled back. Subject 7 was already at her side. "You saw it," she said gently. Clara nodded, voice hoarse. "They didn't just delete the ones that failed. They kept them. Watched them die. Me, or someone like me." Subject 7's eyes were glassy. "I remember that version. She only lived 3 weeks, but she hummed when it rained." Clara turned toward the car. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. "Let's finish this." Back inside, Alistair held up his phone. Elspeth just sent a voice file. It was queued hours ago. Time to trigger if Site 7 went dark. He played it. "Clara, if you're hearing this, it means Hale's final lock is about to close. Site 8 isn't just a lab. It's a vault. Claire said if it ever wakes, it will try to overwrite all previous versions, digitally and biologically. The only key to stopping it is inside you. Because you're the only version who was never meant to be retrieved." The road to Ashdown Orphanage curved like a scar through the trees. No signs, no lights. Just memory, pulling Clara forward like gravity. It wasn't just her memory anymore. It was Claire's, Catherine's, Elise's. It was Subject 7's, silent in the back seat, eyes locked on the horizon. They arrived just before nightfall. The orphanage stood where it always had, but it looked different now. Less like a ruin, more like a mask. The outer structure still bore the signs of fire, scorched stone, blackened beams. But beneath the decay, something hummed, subtle, synthetic. Clara felt it in her chest. "This place is still alive," she said. Alistair ran his scanner across the front gate. Not just alive, reinforced. Someone's still funding this site. They circled to the rear, found a collapsed greenhouse wall, slipped through. Inside, the walls bore initials carved in crooked hands, kids marking territory they barely understood. CBJMELMB, all of them. Her. And at the end of the long hallway, half covered in ivy, they found a trap door. Heavy. Steel. With no visible mechanism to open it. Clara reached for it, and the panel lit up beneath her palm. A voice spoke from nowhere and everywhere at once. "Welcome back, Lena." Subject 7 stepped closer. "That was her name," she whispered. "Before she was divided." Clara's throat tightened. "Before I was." The floor shuddered. A lift descended beneath their feet, smooth, silent, deep, below Ashdown. The lights were perfect, white, even, artificial in a way that made Clara's skin crawl. The floor gleamed like water. The walls were all glass, corridors of reflections. She walked forward slowly, flanked by Subject 7 and Alistair. Inside one of the observation rooms, a chair sat in the center, bolted to the floor. Familiar. Too familiar. This had been the first reconstruction chamber. The place where Claire's memories had been fragmented, copied, and grafted into new subjects. The place where each new version had been calibrated. And above the chair, a line etched in metal. "Memory is not truth. It is architecture." A door hissed open behind them. They turned. Hale, not flanked by guards, not armed, just present, like he always was, too calm, too certain. He looked at Clara, then Subject 7, then back to Clara. "Now we're finally all in the same room," he said softly. Alistair raised his gun. Hale didn't flinch. "I'm not here to stop you," he said. "I'm here to offer what you've been chasing." "Redemption?" Clara asked. "No," Hale said. "Rest, for all of you. No more questions, no more versions, just silence." Clara stared. "You mean death?" "I mean peace." Subject 7 took a step forward. "And what happens to us if we refuse?" Hale's smile was sad. "Then you overwrite the world with memory that was never meant to exist. You fracture it. You become not human, but echoes on repeat." And you'd rather erase us than let us live? Clara asked. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The lights flickered. Once, a warning. This place had one last defense. The air in the lab turned heavy, like the walls were holding their breath. Clara's eyes flicked between Hale, still composed in the doorway, and Subject 7, whose face was unreadable now. 1,000 expressions trapped just beneath the surface. Hale stepped forward. I didn't want this ending, he said. But the core protocol was written long ago. If Subject 7 is overloaded, if she breaches the convergence threshold, her mind will trigger a recursive purge. Not just this facility, not just your files, every digital echo of Winterglass. Gone. He looked at Clara. And you'll go with them, because you're tethered to her. Deeply. Subject 7 stared at Hale, then at Clara. Her voice was quiet. Is it true? Hale nodded. You are the anchor, but she is the detonator. Alistair raised the gun again. There has to be a way to separate them. There isn't, Hale said calmly. It was always going to come to this. Clara stepped forward, close enough to see the reflection of the lab lights in Hale's eyes. Why now? She asked. Why tell me all this if you're just going to erase us anyway? Hale looked tired. Because for the first time, he didn't lie. Because I wanted to see if you'd choose it yourselves. He gestured to the terminal beside the chair. There are two options. You connect and lose everything. You walk away. But someone else comes in after you. Another clone, another cycle. The lab stays alive. The program continues. The next version replaces you. Clara stared at the blinking screen. Subject 7 stepped beside her. I don't want to forget, she said. Clara took her hand. I don't want them to forget us. Suddenly, Subject 7 pulled away. Her eyes locked with Clara's, calm, certain, final. Then you remember, she said. Before Clara could react, Subject 7 turned and ran to the terminal. She slammed her hand on the pad. Manual override engaged. Primary convergence vessel selected. Subject 7. No! Clara shouted, surging forward. But Alistair grabbed her. It was too late. Subject 7 turned to her one last time, tears in her eyes. You gave me back a name, she said. Now I'll make sure no one takes it again. And then the light consumed her. The chair lit up. The mirrors shattered, all of them. The system screamed in a silent voice only they could hear. Memory convergence. Complete. Project. Winterglass terminated. When it was over, the lab was dark. No hum, no data stream. Just the three of them. Clara, Alistair, and Hale vanished. Only the echoes remained. Outside, the sky had turned to ash-blue morning. Clara sat in the field outside Ashdown, her coat wrapped around her shoulders, staring into the horizon. She's gone, she whispered. Alistair sat beside her. No, he said. She's in you now. Clara closed her eyes. She remembered humming when it rained. She remembered screaming in the mirror room. She remembered the first name she ever had. And the last. It started with a silence. Not the kind that followed grief or sleep or surrender, but a digital silence, an erasure so precise it didn't scream. It simply ceased. No more references to Project Winterglass. No more records of Site 7 or Ashdown or Subject 7. Government databases blinked and forgot. Hard drives spun and found nothing. Secure servers logged, file path empty. The world had lost a story it didn't know it was telling. But Clara hadn't. She sat across from Elspeth in the cottage's kitchen, the walls now papered in maps and torn photographs. Her tea went cold in her hands. I still see her, Clara said. Not like a ghost, not like a dream, just beside me, inside me. She doesn't speak, but I remember what she would have said. Elspeth nodded slowly. That's convergence. You didn't inherit her. You became whole. But I'm not all of her. Number just enough to know she loved you. Enough to know she made that choice for both of you. Alistair leaned against the door frame, eyes darker than usual. They'll come back, he said. Not Hale, maybe, but someone. You don't kill a project that big without splinters. They'll need a key, Elspeth said. And you, she turned to Clara, are the only one left who remembers the lock. They thought that was the end of it. Until 3 days later, Clara received the envelope. No return address, no postage. Hand-delivered. Slipped under the door of Elspeth's cottage in the middle of the night. Inside, a single piece of paper. Typed, clean, no smudges, just 4 lines. You destroyed the servers, but not the seed. We've already begun again. Signed, R.H. Clara stared at the letter for a long time. Her hands didn't shake, her voice didn't break. But in her mind, she heard Subject 7 whisper, "Memory is a virus. Try to kill it, and it only hides." The return address was a lie. Elspeth ran it through every secure node she had. CIA scrape servers, MI5 backdoors, even a few old Winterglass backbones still limping through the dark web. The signature matched nothing recent. The metadata on the paper was blank. But the paper stock, that was old. Too old. Government-milled. Cold-pressed. A type only used on classified communications between 1981 and 1995, which meant the letter wasn't written. It was retrieved. "It's bait," Alistair said, pacing the kitchen. "They want you to chase it." Clara nodded. "And I will." Elspeth crossed her arms. Not without backup. So they turned to the only name left on Elspeth's burner contact list. Dr. Eric Vallis, a geneticist once assigned to the Prague Convergence team in the final years before Winterglass officially dissolved. He'd vanished after the Belarus incident in 2002, presumed either dead or reabsorbed by private defense contracts. Now, he was alive, and operating something called the Mirror Archive, hidden beneath an old Cold War vault in Prague. Clara didn't. Vallis appeared behind them, older now, face half lost behind a beard and a bitter expression. "She's version 9A, he said. "I tried to stabilize the code, but the seed fragment was incomplete. There was no empathy, no fear, just pattern recognition and mimicry." Clara stared through the glass. "She looks like me." "She is you," he said, "but without the years, without the struggle. She's you without memory." A shell. The girl on the floor looked up suddenly, straight into Clara's eyes, and whispered, "Am I the real one?" The glass between them suddenly felt thinner. Version 9. A pressed her palm against the window, fingers splayed. Her expression was unreadable, but not blank, not anymore. She had seen Clara, and something clicked. "You're the one they buried," she whispered. "You're the one who survived the burn." Clara stepped closer. "How do you know that?" "I saw it," 9A said, tapping her temple. "Not with eyes, with fragments, ghost thoughts, floating in the cold." Behind them, Dr. Vallis shifted uncomfortably. "I told you," he said. "The Mirror Archive stores data like sediment. Even when I deleted the convergence code, the memory patterns lingered. She's accessing shadows. Echoes that shouldn't be readable." Alistair frowned. "You were trying to rebuild Subject 7. Vallis nodded. "She was the most complete human algorithm we'd ever seen. Memory, adaptation, intuition. I didn't want to repeat Hale's mistakes. I wanted to refine them." Clara turned to him. "You didn't refine anything. You revived it." He didn't flinch. "She's not dangerous." A siren blared from the corridor. A red light strobed across the walls. A voice barked from the speaker overhead. "Containment breach, Sector B. Subject 9A is mobile." Clara spun. Inside the glass cell, version 9A was gone. Just a single handprint remained, burned into the inner surface of the mirror wall. They moved fast. Alistair drew his sidearm, and Valis unlocked a weapons locker embedded in the wall. The mirror archive was deep, but not secure. It had been built for storage, not survival. Security footage tracked 9A down a side corridor toward the data server room. "She's drawn to the code," Clara said, breathless. "It's like gravity." "Or instinct," Valis added. They caught up to her 2 levels down, standing perfectly still in front of a bank of mainframes, fingers twitching above the glowing surface of a biometric reader. She didn't look up when Clara approached. "I saw all of you," 9A said softly. "The girl in the chair, the one who ran, the one who died before she learned her name." Clara didn't speak. "I thought I was empty," 9A continued, "but you're the one who made me whole." Then she looked up, and for the first time, her expression shifted, something like pain. "I don't want to be a pattern." Clara's throat tightened. "Then don't be." 9A's hand hovered over the terminal. A drive slot opened beneath her palm. Clara saw it too late. "She's trying to upload herself into the archive," Valis shouted. "If she succeeds, there'll be no way to purge her." Clara moved, not with violence, but with certainty. She stepped between 9A and the console, hand over the drive slot. "Don't," she said gently. "You don't have to become a copy." 9A hesitated. Then, slowly, she backed away and collapsed into Clara's arms. They sedated 9A and returned her to containment. Not a cell. A room. Clara insisted, not because she trusted her, but because something in 9A's eyes, just before she blacked out, had looked like hers. The same haunted flicker she had seen in the mirror the day she first remembered her name. "She's not stable," Alistair warned. "She's not supposed to be," Clara replied. "Neither was I." That night, Clara sat alone in the archive's data core, surrounded by towers of humming machines, each one a coffin of memory, of trial, of failure. She ran a scan, not for threats, for voices. One folder nested deep, flagged as time-locked user 06C, her ID, but the file was created after Subject 7 died. Her hand trembled as she opened it. Audio only. Her own voice, a little older, a little rougher, but undeniably hers. "If you're listening to this, I don't know which version you are anymore. All I know is you're still searching, still hoping there's a way to save what we lost. There isn't. Not all of it. But there's something better than answers. There's memory that chooses to stay. We were never meant to survive. But we did. So make it count. Let someone remember us. Let someone love us." The message cut out. Just 7 seconds. But Clara sat there for an hour after, staring at the dark screen. At 3:14 a.m., someone slipped another envelope under the archive's reinforced door. No alarms tripped, no footage caught the delivery. Inside, a single page, a handwritten note. Curved lettering, familiar, Claire's. "She's not broken, she's blooming. Teach her how to remember the rain." And beneath it, taped to the paper, a pressed wildflower. Rain lavender. Found only in the fields near Ashdown. The pressed flower was delicate. Its lavender petals faded to silver at the edges, veins still visible like lines on an old map. Clara turned it over slowly in her hands. On the back of the envelope was a number. Number 14. She recognized the reference instantly. Each lower level of the mirror archive was sealed behind biometric and analog locks. 12 in total. But Elspeth had once mentioned rumors of a 13th vault, and Valis scoffed at the suggestion of a 14th, claiming it was just a ghost label in the indexing system, an administrative error. But ghosts, Clara had learned, usually told the truth in whispers. She brought the flower to the central console in the archive's mainframe. There, on the touchless reader plate, was a tiny square cavity, only noticeable when the lights dimmed, just like now. The moment she placed the flower down, the system reacted. Not with an alarm, not with force, but with recognition. Access granted Archive Room number 14, the Rain Lavender Room authorized CB, Initial Creator Key, Secondary Inheritance 06C, Clara Benton. Alistair appeared behind her, watching the terminal flicker. Where does it lead? Clara looked back at him. Nowhere on a map, she said, but maybe somewhere in memory. They descended in silence, below the secure levels, past the storage banks and severed sub-archives, down into a place without cameras. At the bottom was a single hallway, no mirrors, just damp stone, and the scent of something wild, rain and lavender. Clara opened the door at the end and gasped. It wasn't a vault, it was a recreation, a room that looked exactly like a childhood bedroom, her bedroom from the house in Rockford. Walls painted in soft blues, a desk by the window, an old rollerblade scuffed by a time, and taped to the mirror, a photo of Claire, smiling, happy, alive. Subject 9. A stepped in behind her. She stopped in the doorway, then fell to her knees, overcome. What is this place? Clara knelt beside her. It's where we learn to feel safe. The light in the room wasn't artificial. It glowed like memory, not exact, not clinical, emotional. The window showed rain, falling gently across a fictional world they both recognized. Subject 9A's eyes filled with tears. Teach me, she whispered, how to remember this. Clara took her hand, and for the first time, they sat in silence without fear. The window didn't look out onto Prague. It didn't look out onto anywhere real. It looked inward, into a shared memory, reconstructed by code and scent and emotion. Outside, rain fell softly on imaginary glass. Inside, peace hung in the air like breath. Subject 9. A sat cross-legged on the rug, staring at the walls. She'd stopped crying, but the awe in her eyes hadn't faded. I've never dreamed, she said softly. Clara looked at her. What do you mean? 9A shrugged. Sleep was just stillness, nothing behind my eyes, no colors, no stories, just black. She touched the corner of the desk, the same desk that had existed in Clara's childhood room. But last night, after the memory cascade, I saw something. Clara sat beside her. What? I saw a girl, 9A said, voice trembling. And she was me, but she had a name. She laughed. She tripped in the rain and didn't care. Clara didn't respond, because she'd seen the same dream once, 20 years ago. Taped beneath the drawer of the desk was a tiny envelope, aged and fragile. Clara pried it loose. Inside, a USB key, shaped like a pressed flower. She inserted it into the terminal embedded in the wall. A screen unfolded silently from the mirror. Playback. Claire. Barlow.final.entry. Claire appeared on screen, older than any other recording Clara had seen. Early 30s. Her hair longer, flecked with gray. Her voice steadier than ever. If you're watching this, it means I chose memory. And you did too. She smiled. This isn't a warning. It's a gift. Everything they made me forget, I kept here. The smell of the rain, the warmth of a quiet room, the sound of laughter from someone I wasn't afraid to lose. Memory isn't pain. It's proof we lived. So remember. The screen faded, and in its place, just 2 words appeared. Your turn. Clara turned to 9A. The girl's eyes were wet again, but her posture was calm. I want to dream again, she whispered, even if it hurts. Clara nodded. You will. Then the intercom crackled. Elspeth's voice, low and urgent. Clara, you need to come back to the surface, now. We found something, a signal, a counterseed embedded in the archive's dormant code. It's spreading. Clara stood, heart already racing. Alistair appeared in the doorway. What kind of signal? Elspeth didn't pause. The kind Hale designed to survive even after he didn't. Back in the main archive level, the rain lavender scent vanished like it had never been there. Gone was the soft memory glow of Claire's refuge. In its place, cold fluorescent lights, flickering monitors, the sound of machines waking with intent. Elspeth stood over the central console, jaw tight, fingers flying across keys. Clara stepped up beside her. "What are we looking at?" Elspeth didn't glance away. A dormant mirror fragment, tagged for disposal but never wiped. Somehow it carried an embedded failsafe. It's self-replicating, code written in Hale's style but masked in your own memory patterns. Alistair cursed under his breath. "So it looks like Clara." "More than that," Elspeth said grimly. "It acts like her. It mimics you, Clara, your voice, your thought rhythms. It even signs as Subject 06C." Clara's stomach turned. "What happens if it finishes replicating?" "Then the entire archive syncs to the wrong Clara," Elspeth said. "A false Clara, one built to obey Hale's final protocol." They stood in silence. Then 9A stepped forward, eyes fixed on the screen. "What if I go in?" Clara turned sharply. "No." But 9A was already staring at the code cascade as it unraveled across the interface. A spiral, fractalized, pulsing like a heartbeat. "I can speak to it," she said. "I'm not just a version anymore. I'm an echo. I can find the root thread." Alistair looked at Clara. "She's not wrong. Her neural map is half blank, half everyone. That might be the only thing Hale didn't account for." Elspeth hesitated. "If she connects and it pulls her in, I won't let it," 9A said. Clara stepped in front of her. "You've just started to live." 9A smiled. "So let me protect the memory of who made that possible." Before anyone could stop her, she stepped up to the neural interface, laid her hand on the plate. The system reacted. Identity conflict detected. 06C:0:9, a run reconciliation? YN9A didn't wait. She said one word, "Yes," and the system swallowed her. Inside the mirror code, 9A floated in a digital ocean of fragments. She saw Claire's laughter, Catherine's defiance, Elise's fear, Clara's rain-light joy. And buried beneath it all, a face with no eyes, a voice with her cadence, a seed copy, shaped to sound like love, but empty of it. It reached for her. "I am you," it whispered. 9A whispered back, "No, I remember the rain," and crushed it. In the server room, the monitors blinked. Reconciliation complete. Counterseed purged. Echo integrity stable. Clara exhaled. The screen lit up with a new message. Dream granted. And 9A opened her eyes. The air in the mirror archive felt different now. No alarms, no pulses of corrupted code. Just silence. The kind that follows a choice well made. Subject 9. A rested in the observation wing, asleep for the first time under her own terms. Elspeth had monitored her vitals, shaking her head in awe. "She's stable," she said. "Not just conscious, balanced. She integrated the echo." Clara stood by the window, watching rain fall again. This time, real rain, streaking the glass with soft trails like fingers dragging memory down. Alistair joined her. "You okay?" She nodded slowly. "She saved the memory of us. Maybe you saved her first." Clara didn't answer, because something had changed in her since the moment 9A whispered, "I remember the rain." Something deeper than gratitude. Something like recognition. Like two pieces of a story had finally found each other after being written in different languages. Later that night, Elspeth handed Clara a weathered journal, found behind a false panel in the rain lavender room. Claire's final entry. Clara opened it with reverence. The handwriting was older, slower, but still undeniably Claire's. There was a first version, before me, before Winterglass had a name. Her name was Lena, just Lena. She didn't have subjects or mirrors or protocols. She just had a room, a rainlight window, a voice she used too softly. Hale called her the template. She was never meant to remember anything, but she remembered me. Clara's breath caught. Flipped to the final page. Only one line. If you find her, she might still be waiting to be named. A knock came at the outer corridor door. Strange. No one ever approached without clearance. Alistair answered cautiously, hand on his sidearm. A woman stood in the hallway. Older, frail but upright, wrapped in a thick coat, pale eyes gleaming beneath her hood. She looked past Alistair, straight at Clara, and said, "I think I used to be called Lena." The woman calling herself Lena sat at the center table in the archives observation room. She drank tea slowly, like someone savoring warmth for the first time in years. Clara sat across from her, fingers still on the closed journal Claire had left behind. Alistair leaned silently against the far wall. Elspeth monitored vitals from the lab suite, though her attention was clearly on the conversation bleeding through the intercom. Clara broke the silence first. "You said you think your name was Lena." The woman smiled softly, faint lines etched deep around her mouth. "Not sure anymore. Memory's a strange thing. You fold it too many times, it forgets what page it started on." Clara studied her. She looked real, worn but grounded. Not a construct, not a clone. Something older, something original. "Were you part of the project?" Lena nodded slowly. Before it had walls, before it had a name. She reached into her coat and pulled out something wrapped in cloth, unfolded it. Inside, a child's drawing. Faded ink, crayon, 6 girls holding hands. One in the center wore no color, just pencil lines. "That's how I remembered you," Lena said. "All of you. I was the space you came from, but I never had a name until they took mine." Clara felt something tighten in her chest. "You were the template. I was the proof," Lena said. "That memory could be stored in silence, that if they made me forget enough times, the system could reset without glitch. But it didn't." Lena nodded. "I kept one thing, a name, yours." In the adjoining room, Subject 9A watched the conversation through the observation glass. She sat alone, arms wrapped around her knees, eyes focused, listening, not with fear, but understanding. Lena's voice was steady, but faint, like someone reciting a poem remembered from childhood. "They thought they could wipe me clean. Every time I slept, they took something. A memory, a sound, a word." She looked down at the faded drawing on the table between them. "But the one thing they couldn't erase was you." Clara frowned. "Me? You weren't born yet," Lena said. "But I dreamed of you, the girl who ran, who fought, who came back. Over and over I'd see her standing in the rain. I didn't know your name then, but I felt like I was waiting for you." Clara swallowed hard. "I thought I was just a result," she said. "An outcome." "You were the answer," Lena whispered. "You were the part of me that survived becoming someone else." Across the hall, 9A rose from her seat. She entered the room silently and approached the table. Lena looked up and smiled. "You're not one of them." "No," 9A said. "I'm all of them, and also none." She turned to Clara. "I want a name." Clara blinked. "What do you mean?" "I've been called Subject 9A, Copy, Echo, Archive." Her voice shook. "But I want to be something I choose, not something they gave." Lena nodded. "A name is the first memory that belongs to you." 9A took a long breath, then said, "Call me Mira. It means mirror, but it's mine now." Clara smiled through tears. "Hello, Mira." The terminal buzzed. Elspeth's voice broke in. "I've scanned the remaining mirror drives. All corrupted files have been purged. The archive is yours now, Clara. What do you want to do with it?" Clara turned to Mira, then to Lena, then back to the humming core of everything that had once been Project Winterglass. They stood before the core terminal. Clara, Mira, Alistair, Elspeth, and Lena. The mirror archive, now dormant, pulsed softly like a living heart settling into sleep. Clara rested her palm on the console. The system responded, not with resistance, but recognition. User 06C verified access. Full route awaiting final instruction. She turned to the others. "We were made to forget," she said. "But we remembered anyway. That's the part they never understood. That memory isn't something you store. It's something you carry." Elspeth nodded. "So what now?" "I don't want revenge," Clara said. "And I don't want to bury the truth. I want to protect it, on our terms." She looked at Mira. "We make something new, not a lab, not a weapon, a capsule." Mira stepped forward, eyes shining. "A place where names are safe." Clara entered the sequence. Archive restructure. Initiate new designation. Memory capsule. Rainlight series content. Filter. Trauma. Redacted. Identity preserved. Emotional imprint. Prioritized. The console blinked. Then, in soft, fading text, "Pain was part of us, but so was the rain." They watched as the mirror drives began their transformation. Some softly glowing, others fading to dark, never to be reactivated. The archive wouldn't be destroyed. It would become a garden, one grown from the seeds of memory they chose to keep. Later, as Mira prepared to leave the facility for the first time, she stood by the exit hatch, fingers grazing the cold frame. "I've never seen a sky that wasn't programmed," she whispered. Clara stepped beside her. "You will." And they walked into the early morning together. Inside, Lena stood before a single remaining screen. One last lock waited. It asked only one question: name. She typed slowly, carefully, then smiled as she pressed enter. Lena Barlow. "A match confirmed," she whispered. "I remember now." The soil behind the old Ashdown orphanage was soft after the rain. Clara knelt beside the roots of the only tree still standing, a crooked ash, grown wild in a place once devoted to forgetting. In her hands, a bundle wrapped in cloth. Inside, a pair of worn, pink and blue rollerblades, scuffed, scarred, marked on the toe with fading initials, EGW. They had once been a clue, a mystery, a beginning. Now they were a memory. She placed them gently in the earth, covering them by hand. No gravestone needed. No plaque, just the rustle of leaves and the quiet rhythm of her breathing. Mira stood behind her silent. When Clara rose, Mira asked, "Why bury them?" Clara looked toward the sky, gray but full of light. "Because it's time to let the questions rest. What matters now is what comes next." That evening, back in the Rainlight archive, Mira sat at the desk once built for a child who never got to grow up. She opened a new journal, untitled, pages clean, and she began to write. Day 1. Today, I walked outside, not as a copy, not as a version, not as data, but as someone with a name. My name is Mira. I dreamed, I remembered, I laughed. I think that means I'm real. And elsewhere, far from servers and protocols and numbers, Clara walked through the streets of a world still too loud, still too busy, but somehow softer. When the rain came, she didn't run for cover. She closed her eyes, lifted her face, and let it fall. Somewhere, in memory, she heard Claire laugh. She joined her,